Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Super Tease video. The Cataclysm beta just released, and it seems like it's going to be just around the corner. And Cataclysm PVP is a cornerstone for amazing gameplay. This is one of my all-time favorite expansions when it comes to PvP. It was the first expansion that I started to see high rating success, participating in tournaments, and it held huge legendary moments from this expansion, and it's one that you certainly do not want to miss out on, especially for certain specializations when you compare them to retail World of Warcraft. So in today's video, I'm going to be constructing a tier list of the specializations and which ones you absolutely need to play and what is it about them that is making them so sensational in this expansion. So let's get started. The first specialization, not going to be the most sensational, at least that's listed here, which is the combat rogue. At least to my memory, pretty much every rogue was playing subtlety. So if you're somebody who prefers the assassination or the combat playstyle, it's probably not going to be one of the best expansions for you. The Blood Death Knight is a tyrannical specialization. It is absolutely a monster, completely disgusting, and I do not suggest that you play it unless you want to make enemies, but I do remember having nightmares of multiple Blood Death Knights and Ret Paladins coordinating together. This is one of the maybe more negative sides of the Cataclysm expansion. So this thing was an absolute monster. Really disgusting specialization. Frost Death Knight. Now, if you played a lot of retail WoW, you probably might be getting bored of Frost Death Knight. Cataclysm Frost Death Knight was actually pretty fun. You had a lot of extra crowd controls like the Hungering Cold and AoE Polymorph. Your damage was more spread out into things like Howling Blast. It was actually a pretty solid specialization overall, predominantly with double melee DPS. I'm going to be putting it about mid, maybe an A tier even. It was definitely a lot better than retail overall in class design and performance. So I would definitely recommend it if you're a Frost Death Knight PvP fan to give Cataclysm a go. Unholy Death Knight, I think it's one leg up though on Frost Death Knight. I think the rune system was a lot more unique and special to Death Knight in Cataclysm, which made it very fun. Gargoyle is super powerful in this expansion. You're going to be powering enemies down, and Unholy and Death Knight in general was really strong because Resto Shaman was so good, and you just kind of ran at Resto Shamans and took them out. The Desecrated Ground and the Necrotic Strike were super fun mechanics that are kind of missing from Unholy on retail WoW. So I'm slapping Unholy DK up here onto the S tier. I think if you're a Death Knight player in general, this is an expansion that you absolutely should not miss out on if you missed it the first time, to really see what Death Knight in the past could offer to you. Balanced Druid is another fantastic specialization. You're going to see Thorns become a cooldown, and it's actually pretty threatening towards fast attacking melee like Feral Druid and Rogues. You're going to be getting Wild Mushroom, and this is when the Eclipse system was first introduced. Now, the Cataclysm Eclipse system, you would pause yourself generally in Solar Eclipse because it would convert your Moonfire to Sunfire. You'd have Moonfire or Sunfire Insect Swarm, which are both nature, which would amplify your dot damage to a huge level. You had Wild Mushrooms, and what I would consider to be the most fun version of Wild Mushrooms, you could place them on the ground and then manually detonate them. So you could Cyclone a target, place 3 mushrooms below them, hardcast a Starfire, and as that Cyclone ends, explode the mushrooms and just hit somebody for a massive amount of burst damage. You carry a huge amount of hybrid abilities. You have all of your Resto Druid spells, Nourish, Life Bloom, so you can off-heal, play support, and in this expansion, Agility and Intellect were somewhat shared, so you can go in cat form as well and add meaningful damage. To me, this is one of the highlight moments for Moonkin of almost any expansion. It's my favorite, at least, so we're putting it up here onto the S tier. It's a remarkable specialization you do not want to miss out on if you've considered playing Balanced Druid. Feral Druid is another one that is really good in Cataclysm. You get Predatory Swiftness, instant clones, although this is not necessarily completely new to Feral with Cataclysm from Wrath of the Lich King. It's still a really powerful and potent mechanic. You do a tremendous amount of damage in terms of pressure. I'm going to be throwing Feral Druid up onto the A tier. It doesn't have anything that I remember that's completely unique to something like retail WoW, aside from the instant cast Cyclones, but its overall performance was really good. Combinations like Feral Druid and Death Knight were pretty scary combinations for 3v3. Guardian Druid, I don't remember anything happening with Guardian Druid. I don't think that it was strong in comparison to Feral Druid or Blood Death Knight or some of the other tank specializations that were in PvP. So I'm placing it down at a D tier. Resto Druid, unfortunately, was not great in this expansion. I would probably debate it to be the worst healer overall. It was really tough just with overall throughput to come through. Everybody was struggling. Most people gave up on this. So if you're a Resto Druid main and you really want to play Resto Druid, unfortunately, I think Cataclysm is likely going to have to be a pass. I just remember it being not competitive with all the other healers. Beast Mastery Hunter, again, similarly, I don't remember anyone playing Beast Mastery. Most people were playing Marksmanship. It had a lot of instant crowd control, a little bit of the points obviously into the survival tree, but I don't remember any dedicated Beast Masteries. I feel like this is when Beast Mastery fell off from Wrath of the Lich King. So Beast Mastery Hunter is probably not something that's going to be, something really worth checking out, I think, with this expansion. Marksmanship Hunter, on the other hand, though, this is when it first transferred over into using focus as opposed to mana, which gave it a lot of on-demand damage. You didn't have to worry about resetting your mana or running out of resources. You had a huge amount of instant crowd control. You had pets that had abilities like Monkey Stun, where you'd sit on an island taming monkeys. Now, assuming that we are using the final patch tuning in the first patch, you're not going to be able to do that, but you still have some of the most instant cast crowd control that you can use on multiple targets, which enables you to just control the fight way more than you can on Marksmanship on retail, which is why I think Marksmanship is a way better experience on Cataclysm. And if you play Marksmanship Hunter, you really got to give it a go to see for yourself all of the benefits that were provided to it in this expansion. Survival Hunter, again, because the talent trees are shared, they're like a mixed tree. You're going to play some combination of Marksman and Survival. I don't remember anybody playing like, maybe my memory of Hunter isn't serving me exactly, but I wouldn't say that Survival. It's either Survival and Marksman were like very similar in identity. I think Marksman was for the silencing shot, and Survival was more for like some of the the roots on your traps, and I think the Wyvern Sting as well into that. But I don't think anybody was really a dedicated Survival Hunter, so it's probably somewhere down here. Specifically, Arcane Mage at the start of Cataclysm in its original release was absolutely disgusting. But since we're using the final patch, I could see it being squishier and not as good. It was still pretty straightforward, just spamming Arcane Blasts. I don't think that it's going to be like the highlight Mage specialization. I actually think probably Arcane on retail is going to be a little bit of a better experience than Arcane on Cataclysm. So putting it kind of like middle of the pack, maybe a little bit lower than middle of the pack for Cataclysm specifically. Fire Mage, on the other hand, this is like one of the best times to have ever been a Fire Mage throughout PvP. I can remember Volkazar playing with Seranus and playing Balanced Druid Fire Mage, and you would just melt people with Combustion. Combustion was a damage over time effect that you would be stacking up your dots and then blast and then spread onto the entire team like a wildfire and just melt everybody on the team. Completely unique flavor, amazing, fun, unique play style. We're shoving this one up onto the S tier. It's a really powerful and good one. Frost Mage, this is another one that's really fun and a step up from Wrath of the Lich King. You can use Cold Snap on offensive abilities like your Orb. And I remember fighting like Mitch Jones in Cataclysm, and he'd send out his orb, he'd cold snap, send out a second orb. You'd use some combination of like Deep Freeze, Blanket, and you would just absolutely tap people with Ice Lance. It was a really big powerhouse. I don't think it's as flavorful as Fire Mage was in terms of a unique playstyle. It's still kind of similar in the sense on retail with builds that you've got. So it's going to be a little bit lower, but it was definitely a very good time in Cataclysm to my memory. Paladin was kind of like a counter pick healer. It was particularly good into like the Hunter comps and the Rogue comps, where Resto Shamans would normally struggle. You'd see that in the finals at BlizzCon. I think it was Pooks was playing a Paladin in matchups against Hunters as opposed to playing a Shaman because it would really struggle. So Paladin was pretty decent from my memory. I don't want to say that was like spectacularly amazing, but maybe like middle of the pack. I think you'll have a decent time, but it is again more of a counter pick healer. You'll get other matchups into non-hunters, but if you play with hunters, I mean, we saw Jung Yup win with the hunter and the Death Knight composition, so it's definitely still going to be really good. Prop Paladin, I don't remember at all from Cataclysm. I don't. It was all Rep Paladin, so I'm going to assume that Prop Paladin didn't really have a huge place, unlike it did unless there's some sort of Prop Holy builds that I'm forgetting about. I don't remember it distinctly standing out, so I don't think it's going to be that great of one for Cataclysm specifically. Ret Paladin, on the other hand, you're getting a huge amount of survivability with the introduction of Word of Glory, and this version heals for a lot, to the point where you could basically substitute a healer. A lot of people were playing triple DPS, they're playing Rogue, Hunter, and Ret Paladin, playing Blood Death Knight, Ret Paladin compositions. You could really substitute out Rogue Death Knight, Ret Paladin, just running down Shamans was how this was adapted. It was really strong. I would say it's probably still going to feel pretty similar, though, to kind of a retail Ret Paladin in that sense. Off healing support. You got maybe more sustained damage, killing shamans and stuns. I think it's probably going to... It's definitely one of the most powerful specs if we're ranking this on power. So maybe we put it up here with Death Knight. It was a really good spec. The Guardian of Kings for tankiness and defense. Inquisition to boost up your damage. It was a good time for Ret Paladins in Cataclysm. Disc Priest, although, you know, maybe it wasn't noted as much as Resto Shaman in terms of its overall competitive viability, you'd still see it pop up. Particularly, I remember Soda healing Ret Paladins and Unholy Death Knights together, and RMP, Rogue Mage Priest. I think that it was still good. I think it was a really fun healer overall. I'm going to be slotting this one up onto the A tier. Holy Priest, I don't remember seeing any. I think it's probably similar to where Resto Druid is. I don't remember seeing almost any. I think Holy Priest doesn't really come into competitive PvP till Mystic Pandaria when you get Lightwell. So maybe not the best, but maybe you could make it work, and maybe people just didn't know in the past, and maybe my memory's not serving me 100%, but I don't remember. I don't have any memories of it particularly. Shadow Priest was remarkable. Much like Boomkin, you had all the extra utility. You had Prayer of Mending. You could off-heal. It was really strong in dot matchups. I remember Talbadar adjusting his strategy when he used to play Shadow play with Azael. And Sidu, and he would adapt his talents to become like a second healer against dot comps so they could outlast them. It had a lot of unique specializations. You got Mind Spike for burst damage in this expansion. It was decently tanky. This is definitely a good one. I highly recommend playing with like a Warlock or with a Rogue. Those were pretty common ones. And even Feral Druid in some tournaments. Shadow Priest, Feral Druid. For me, I think Shadow Priest is probably coming up onto the S tier. Definitely a great experience overall. Ellie Shaman, unfortunately, not so great. You don't get proc Lava Burst, I think. Or maybe you did get proc Lava Burst. I remember playing it in Season 9 at the start, and it was okay, but then it got really bad really fast. Ellie Shaman, because it was like the best spec in Wrath of the Lich King, they kind of just nailed it against the wall to be really bad in Cataclysm. So I think maybe it's like functional, put it down with Arcane, but I wouldn't recommend Cataclysm as like an Ellie playing expansion. I think it does fall off pretty hard. Enhancement Shaman is also pretty similar. I remember like Death Knight Enhancement Shaman popping up a little bit. But Beast Cleave kind of just ended in this expansion. I think it's probably very similar to where Ellie is ranked currently. Resto Shaman, on the other hand, this is when they made your Dispel heal. Now, I don't know how much it's going to heal, given that it's the final patch in the first one, but it was so powerful because you could just spam Dispel dots, locks were prevalent, and you could now Dispel magic as well. So it was really, really strong in that sense. I'm going to be slotting this one. Also remember that I think you could use Bloodlust still in Arena. So having Bloodlust on the Shaman, or did they remove it? I think you could use it at the start in Season 9 because I remember Mage getting Time Warp, and then I think they removed it. It might not be usable. If Bloodlust is not usable, Shaman is still probably the best healer overall. It has some weaknesses and counters, but I actually wonder if those counters will be as prevalent the second time around. Affliction Warlock. Now, if you're an Affliction main, you've probably been suffering a lot from many expansions in terms of like what you want for the class fantasy or the overall gameplay and threat. This is one where you have to play Affliction. You absolutely have to play Affliction. This version of Affliction is super fun, one of the most fun versions of it. I would debate maybe even close to the most fun version of it. Your damage feels really impactful, meaningful. You have great control of the fight, just spread damage, dot damage, really fun. Especially, basically any dot class is having a great time in Cataclysm. Demonology, I don't remember seeing any. There was a little bit of Destro every once in a while, but I don't remember seeing like practically any Demonology. So Demonology, we're probably going to be slotting down here. I don't remember seeing any of it really. Destro we saw a bit, but I wouldn't recommend it. I'm trying to remember the situations where we saw it. It was like Cleave matchups. Maybe some people went Destro instead. It's not really a Destro expansion. I wouldn't recommend it overall for Destro. But I think it was like somewhat passable. Arms Warrior was really fun. You got Throwdown, which is a stun. You got a lot of extra damaging abilities as well. It's still really good, even moving from Wrath of the Lich King. I'm going to be slotting it up here. Let's just kind of like pair the melee with the melee, the healers with the healer. I think Arms Warriors are really fun. I remember having one in Season 9 and just doing tremendous amounts of damage with Colossus Smash. And just mowing people down with that. It was really fun. Just ping-ponging around still. Warrior still retains basically the fun that it had from Wrath of the Lich King. Fury Warrior, I don't remember seeing any of. I think Fury Warrior is probably going to be similar here. This was still kind of like some classes still only had like one spec that was like considered the most competitive spec. And then so if you're one of these guys, you're probably not going to be the greatest experience. But one of these, it's one of the best expansions ever. Prot Warrior, I don't feel like I remember any Prot Warrior. Wrath, there was quite a bit of Prot Warrior, but I don't remember it. Now it's possible that it was still good. I'm slotting it down here on the lower end. I think it's probably like somewhere. I think Blood Decay completely replaced all the tanks, generally speaking. Assassination, I think, was better than Combat, but still not super prevalent. Shadow Dance was just way better. One of the main reasons Rogue was so good is the introduction of Recuperate, which gave you health per second. It made you basically invincible. It was really powerful. Rogue is maybe not going to be so strong in Season 9 when the PvE gear isn't as prevalent. Assassination is probably like a little bit closer on the lower end, I think, than the other specializations. But Subtlety, this is one where it's like, this is like the king, like Rogue Lock Shaman, right? The combination of these S tier specs was stupendously good. Like one of the best, most common composition easily in competitive play, and was one of the most fun times to play it because you had things like redirect come into the game for Rogue and soul swap for Warlock. So you could redirect a stun and soul swap a bunch of dots to a healer and feel, you know, this like epic swap moment in the game, which is what made it feel completely unique. So if you're one of these specializations on like A and up, and even B, you know, for these specs that maybe you're coming from retail, Cataclysm is absolutely worth it. You've got to see what these specializations brought to PvP and really enjoy them firsthand, because a lot of them are completely unique and a really good time. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video and insight into all the specializations coming into Cataclysm. I myself am definitely going to be diving pretty deep into it, as it's one of my fondest times in the game from memory. And other than that, thank you very much for watching the video. Hit the subscribe button if you want to make sure you're staying up to date with news related to WoW, and I will see you in the next one.